Monster City Madhouse, a year-round online store full of Halloween and classic horror shirts, with an emphasis on the vintage look. Use code SAVE10 for 10% off your order. MonsterCityMadhouse.com. Free shipping and financing's available. Welcome back to Southern Ghost Stories. I am the American Hauntstorian, Alan Searcy. Hey, right off the top, make sure you guys are following Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook and Instagram. Right now, we got our big book giveaways going on through January. First week of February, I'm going to announce the 5 winners. So if you subscribe to the show and leave a review and send a screenshot of the review to Southern Ghost Stories on Facebook or Instagram, you'll be in the drawing for 5 free books that I'll be giving away. And you get to pick the book. I had someone message me a few days ago saying they wanted to get a copy of Old Man Dead. So, I'll pick 5 winners at random, and I'll message you, or if you already sent me what you want, I'll just give away 5 books. But yeah, could be Southern Ghost Stories, Savannah, could be Ghost Stories, Graveyard Tales, Chicago, could be Old Man Dead, could be Hexed. Hey, I've written 40 books, and you get to pick. So hope you guys have fun with this little drawing, this contest, and, get a little buzz for the podcast. So if you know me, I love the Northeast. I love New England. So in the 1700s, you got to think, New England, they were fighting the King of England. In the 1700s, in Middle Tennessee, where I grew up, there's a bunch of Native Americans chasing the buffalo with a spear. So the history is off balance by a lot. But hey, we caught up a little bit in the Civil War, but in the Northeast, there are so many great stories. So today, I want to go to Bangor, Maine, to talk about some of the folklore and ghost stories from the area. But first, something I didn't know, I was researching this episode. Did you know that Bangor wasn't supposed to be the town's name? So in 1791, the American Revolution, it's over. And the Maine wilderness is being carved into new townships. So on the bank of the Penobscot River, a group of settlers, they have a problem. They're officially a plantation, but they want to be a town. They have the people, they have the lumber, and they have a name picked out for this town, Sunbury. So to make it official, they tap a man named Reverend Seth Noble. He's a local minister, a patriot, and by all accounts, a man who lived with a constant soundtrack in his head. His job is simple: sail to Boston, hand over the paperwork to the General Court of Massachusetts, and bring back the charter for the town of Sunbury. Pretty easy, right? Well, it's a long trip, and the whole way there, Seth Noble isn't thinking about the land surveys or tax codes. He's humming. Picture a scene. It's a cramped, dusty office in Boston, high-back chairs, the smell of old ink, and a bored government official who has spent all day processing names like Springfield and Portland. Reverend Noble, he's standing in line, and he's stuck on a song. It's a Welsh hymn called Bangor. It's a moody, heavy tune, the kind that gets under your skin. He's probably tapping his foot, lost in the melody. Well, when the official finally looks up, next, state your business in the name of the intended township. Noble snaps out of it, but his brain is in the middle of a hymn. Without thinking, purely on musical muscle memory, he doesn't say Sunbury. He bursts out the name of the song, Bangor. So the official doesn't double check. He doesn't ask for a spelling. He just clips his pen, scribbles it down, and stamps the document. He didn't clip his pen. He dipped his pen in the ink. Anyway, by the time Noble realizes what he's done, the ink is dry. The town of Sunbury, it's dead before it's even born. When Noble got back to Maine, he had to tell the settlers that their sunny name was gone. They were now citizens of Bangor. Remarkably, they didn't fire him. They embraced it. There's something poetic about it. Most towns are named after kings or generals or the people who founded them. But Bangor, Maine, Bangor was named after a feeling. It was named after a minor key melody that a tired minister couldn't get out of his head. It set the tone for the city. Sunbury sounds like a place where nothing happens. Bangor sounds like a place, with resonance, a place that echoes. So, most people know the name Abraham Lincoln. But if I asked you to name his first vice president, the man who stood by him during the darkest hours of the Civil War, you'd probably come up blank. His name was Hannibal Hamlin. He was a legend from Maine, a staunch abolitionist, and a man who looked like he was carved out of New England granite. So Hamlin was a man's man of the 19th century. He was tough, he was principled, and he didn't care much for the frills of Washington. But after he left the vice presidency, he didn't disappear. He came home. He came back to Bangor, Maine. By 1891, Hamlin was 81 years old. He was a lion in winter, but even lions have their routines. Every afternoon, he'd walk down to the Tarantine Club, an exclusive gentleman's club where the air smelled of expensive tobacco and old money. On July 4th, 1891, while the rest of the country was lighting fireworks, Hannibal Hamlin sat down for one of his last game of cards. He was mid-hand when it happened, a sudden collapse. The cards spilled, the room went silent. The most powerful man Maine had ever produced was dying on the floor of a social club. The members of the club didn't want him to die on the floor. They lifted him up, this heavy, dying statesman, and they laid him across a plush, red leather couch in the corner of the room. And he stayed there for hours as the life drained out of him. By sunset on the 4th of July, Hannibal Hamlin was gone. Now, usually when a famous person dies, we keep their house, or their medals, or their letters. But Bangor, they decided to keep the couch. And today, if you walk into the Bangor Public Library, a stunning marble column building that feels like a temple to knowledge, you'll find that couch. It's sitting there in the rotunda, the quote-unquote death couch. It's a deep oxblood red leather cracked with age. It looks heavy. It looks occupied. That couch has been on display for over a century. And in that time, the library staff and patrons, they started noticing things. It started with cold spots. You could be in the middle of a humid Maine July, walk past the couch, and you feel a draft that chills you to the bone. And then there are the sounds. Librarians working late after the doors are locked report hearing the leather creak, as if someone just sat down or shifted their weight. But the real stories, the one that made people quit their night shifts, are about the man in the rotunda. There have been dozens of accounts of people looking up from their books and seeing a pale, older man in formal 19th century frock coat standing near the couch. He doesn't move. He doesn't speak. He stands there with a quiet, intense, political sternness, watching the people in his library. One researcher claimed she saw a figure sitting on the couch, staring at the floor, looking exactly like a man who had just lost a high-stakes card game. When she blinked, he was gone. But the leather was still depressed, slowly rising back into place as if the weight had just been lifted. Is it Hamlin? Or is it just a collective memory of a city that refuses to let go of its greatest hero? In Bangor, history isn't just in the books on the shelves. Sometimes it's sitting right next to you, waiting for its next turn to deal. So the next time you're in Bangor and you need a quiet place to read, stop by the library. Check out the architecture. Admire the marble. But if you see a red leather couch in the corner, maybe find a different place to sit. Some seats are already taken. So, researching this Bangor episode, I found this wild story. And it's about a lady named Sarah Ware. In September of 1898, Bangor, Maine was a city of wood and ambition. The lumber was flowing, the river was high, and life followed a predictable Victorian rhythm. But that rhythm was shattered when a search party walked into a field at Buck's Hill. They were looking for Sarah Ware. She was a 51-year-old woman who had simply vanished weeks earlier. When they found her, the sight was so gruesome, it reportedly made seasoned woodsmen turn away. Sarah hadn't just been killed, she had been nearly decapitated. The brutality, it suggested a rage that the polite society of Bangor couldn't comprehend. And suspicion immediately fell on a local man named William Tregworthy. He was a rough character, and there was talk of a dispute over money. The police arrested him. The papers called for blood. And the trial, it was the event of the season. And here's the thing about obvious suspects. Sometimes the evidence just isn't there. Trevorgy was acquitted. The case went cold. And Bangor, Maine tried to move on. Well, usually when a case goes cold, the story, it ends there. But for Sarah Ware, the state of Maine decided they weren't quite done with her. They kept her skull. They didn't put it in a medical lab or a museum. They put it in a simple, handmade wooden box. And that box was placed on a shelf in the Penobscot County Courthouse. It was labeled Evidence, State versus Trevorgy. And then it was forgotten. And think about the timeline here. That box sat on the shelf while the Titanic sank. It sat there while the Wright brothers took flight. It was there for the 1911 fire that leveled half the city. It stayed there through the roar of the 20s and the dark days of the Depression. For 100 years, lawyers and clerks walked past that shelf. They filed their paperwork. They argued their cases. They drank their coffee. All while a murder victim's remains sat 3 feet away in a pine box. Sarah Ware's head had become a piece of office furniture. But Sarah didn't stay quiet. Over the decades, the courthouse ghost became a staple of Bangor lore. And this wasn't your typical lady in white. Janitors and late-night security guards reported seeing a headless silhouette, a dark, misty shape that would glide down the corridors of the basement archives. Witnesses say the spirit didn't seem aggressive. It seemed searching. It would linger near the evidence room, hovering around the shelves as if trying to remember which box held the rest of its life. Then came 1998. A local reporter named Janine Pinillo started digging into this old Sarah Ware mystery. She went to the courthouse and asked to see the file, and someone, almost as an afterthought, pointed to the box. When they opened it, there she was. After 100 years, the bureaucratic curiosity was exposed to the light of the 20th century. In 1998, a century after her death, Sarah Ware finally got what the state had denied her: a funeral. A local funeral director provided a casket, a plot was donated, and the evidence was finally buried with the rest of her body. The box is gone now. The shelf is likely holding tax records or zoning permits, but some say the hallways at Penobscot County Courthouse still feel quite heavy when the sun goes down. But once you've kept someone's head for 100 years, the person doesn't just forget. So, hey, I told you guys earlier about the Southern Ghost Stories Facebook and Instagram accounts. I've been asking you guys for a while. Send me some questions. I plan on doing a Q&A episode probably next month, but I've been trying to sprinkle in some user questions, and this is one I get quite often. Hey, Alan, have you ever seen a ghost? This is from Stephen Burns. I've talked about this, I think, several different times, but I get asked it quite a bit, so I'll address it again. Years ago, I lived in a haunted house in South Nashville. It was right behind a big plantation tract called Traveler's Rest. In the 1300s, Middle Tennessee, or that part of Middle Tennessee, it was a Native American village. They're Mississippian Indians, what they were called. Well, in the 1800s, a guy named John Overton, he bought the property, and Overton, he was a fascinating guy. He was an important guy. He was Andrew Jackson's best friend and right-hand man. Overton bought that property, and when he built his house, he dug up 3 stone box graves to build his house that he called Golgotha, which meant House of the Skull. So he later got married, and his wife, she wanted a little softer name, so they called it Traveler's Rest. But anyway, in the 50s, my great-grandparents bought 2 acres, and they built a house there on the back side of the property from the Overton descendants. Well, oddly enough, a year after the house was built, it caught fire, and they rebuilt it in the same footprint. So in the 90s, I guess it's 97, 98, my great-grandfather passed away. Well, in '05 or '06, my great-grandmother was put in a nursing home. So I was asked by a family member to come take over the property and oversee it. Insurance won't cover an abandoned house. So I was asked to come stay on the property. The first night I was in the house, a trash can by the back door moved 8 feet into the kitchen. I woke up that next morning and walked in the kitchen. There's a trash can in the middle of the room. Kind of stood out to me. Weird things always happen. I remember coming home from work on several occasions, and all 3 TVs in the house, the back bedroom, the guest bedroom, and the den, all 3 TVs would be on. I know for a fact they were off when I left to go to work that day. Also, I had a friend say they saw a lady in the corner of my bedroom. I never saw it. I had a light in the den also. I forgot about this. There was a light in the den. Each night I'd turn it off. In the morning I'd wake up and it would be on. It was so persistent and problematic. I unplugged it and stuck it. I stuck it away. I was tired of fooling with it. So one day, I hopped the fence and walked over to the mansion. His Traveler's Rest is a state historic site. And I was talking to a lady, and she's like, "Oh no ghost stories here." So I go to leave, and I see this car pull up, and a lady in period attire gets out, and I'll walk over. She's a volunteer. I said, "Hey, I live over here. Weird things are happening in my house." So she's like, "Well, honey, there's so many ghost stories here, but I'm not allowed to tell you about it." And that's kind of like a common thing. A lot of historic sites, they don't really talk about the paranormal. I know in 2020, for instance, Rosemont in Gallatin, Tennessee, they didn't really do ghost stories. They didn't do investigations. But when the virus stuff happened during the quote-unquote pandemic era, they had to do something to draw in revenue. So they had to have ghost hunts and do the paranormal, leaning to the paranormal to raise money for the house. I know another historic house, Middle Tennessee, was about to go under. Yeah, but the ghost hunts saved the house. So some places don't really lean into it. Some places do. Like if you go into Franklin, Tennessee, the Carter House, which is ground zero for the Battle of Franklin, they will not talk about ghost stories. I've been told they will discipline or fire staff members for even talking about ghosts on tours. But go across the street over to the Lodes House, which was also a Civil War hospital after the Battle of Franklin. They'll invite you in, give you a ghost tour, and show you a video from the night before where a mini ball jumped off a shelf and rolled across the floor. So, yeah, it's weird. Historic sites, they don't really, and usually state-owned sites are really particular. I know, like the Hermitage, Andrew Jackson's home, they won't talk about things, but I've been told by half a dozen people that all kinds of weird stuff happens there. Same with Crag Font, Castilian Springs, arguably one of the most haunted places in Tennessee. Whatever was there actually tried to really harm the caretaker. Threw books at him. It cut his nose with a clock door. But the state of Tennessee doesn't really want the directors talking about that stuff, so it kind of just goes away. But yeah, anyway, long story short, yes, I did had experience in a haunted house. I did see a ghost in Rosemont, in Gallatin, Tennessee. I saw an apparition through a window, saw a man in a fedora. I think I've gone over this many times. But in working on these books, man, I've had so many weird, wild things happen. I've heard things. I've seen things move. I know I was talking about Castilian Springs, Tennessee. I was in Wynwood one night with a quote-unquote ghost hunter, a guy who's been on TV doing paranormal shows. He and I were in the kitchen, and somebody starts walking overhead. And I walk outside, and I found the director, and I said, "Hey, who's upstairs?" "Well, nobody, it's just y'all." So, but I know for a fact I heard footsteps walking above us. And it's just stuff like that. I mean, I've had things happen in St. Louis, the Lent Mansion, which is a very notable haunted location in St. Louis. A lot of suicides took place in this house, and I was staying there in March. I was sitting in my bed watching the basketball tournament, NCAA basketball tournament, and all of a sudden, I smelled this cigar smoke, kind of just off by the bed. Go downstairs, and I talked to the bartender. I said, "Hey, I'm up here in, I think, the lavender suite. Can you smoke in here?" And he said, "No, you have to go outside if you want to smoke." I said, "No, it's not me. It's something is upstairs smoking. There's nobody in the hall. It was just me there that night." So he was like, "Oh, yeah, so-and-so shot himself in that room." So, yeah, I mean, I had a lot of experiences. One day I may sit down and just catalog everything and do a show on that. But, yeah, I get asked that quite often, so I figured, hey, why not go into it here? But yeah, listen, send me more questions on Facebook, Instagram. Also, don't forget the big giveaway. I'm giving away 5 books. All you gotta do is follow the show, subscribe, take a screenshot of your review, and send it over to Facebook or Southern Ghost Stories Facebook, Southern Ghost Stories Instagram. I'll put your name in the hat for 5 free books I'm giving away. So, yeah, appreciate you guys listening. I'm Alan Searcy. You can find me on alansearcy.com, southernghoststories.com. Send me those questions, and hey, I'll see you guys back next week. Check out the exclusive shirts from Monster City Madhouse, Gravestone, Rocktober, and Val Halloween. All that and much more at monstercitymadhouse.com.